just look at the title of this. Cannabis is medicine and the benefits of cannabinoids. We've got about 40 minutes or so. So what I'll do is I'll just do a quick little spiel and then I'll open it up to questions. Because a lot of times that's what most people are here for. They have questions. Just to show of hands, how many people in here admittedly use cannabis? Well, actually that's half, 50%. Now secretly put up the hands for the ones that secretly use it. Okay. So we've got a mixture of people that have used it and people that haven't.
Yeah.
And
I might sign it.
I might sign it too.
You might after you hear what I'm going to tell you. Because the unfortunate thing is people have been lied to constantly by their doctors, their lawyers, their teachers, their parents, their governments for the last 80 years in regards to cannabis. In 2007, I was working every day, usually 12, 14 hours a day would be a typical work day. New Year's Day 2008, I ended up going to the hospital for what I thought was a stroke. 5 days later, after they gave me a few pills and sent me home after telling me it wasn't a stroke, I went back and I was told that I either had the most aggressive form of multiple sclerosis or ALS, and I needed testing. My response was, well, you know, let's hope it's MS, because at least you don't die from it. Probably the wrong thing to say to a doctor whose aunt had recently just died from multiple sclerosis. So I learned very quickly about multiple sclerosis and ALS. And it took just over a year to get a definitive diagnosis. But within a month of being afflicted with what I thought was a stroke, I was at a point where it was almost impossible to walk. So I went to a wheelchair. Ended up being bedridden for a while. And it's a rather miserable existence. But when the doctor had suggested MS or ALS, I started researching because I couldn't go to work, but I could still look at a computer. And I know how to use a computer, so I started researching. And what I started doing was looking at all of the neurological diseases to see which my symptoms best fit. I had myself diagnosed before the official diagnosis had come out, and I was 100% correct in my diagnosis. One of the things that all of them had in relation on the internet was that cannabis will actually help alleviate a lot of the symptoms from these neurological diseases. Because I had to look at ALS, MS, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, they all fall under this autoimmune disorder. Within a few days of realizing that all of the people with these diseases are benefiting using cannabis, I went and got some cannabis. And it worked. Somewhat. But I was smoking it. And just trying to smoke as much as I could, but you can only smoke so much when you're trying to get relief, if you're really bad off. March of that same year, I met Mr. Rick Simpson. He'd done a video called Run from the Cure. I watched the video, I understood the video, but I had some questions, so I went and talked to him. And he had no evidence of it helping anybody with neurological illnesses. He was dealing more with cancer, diabetes, things like that. But his comment was, you won't know unless you try it. So I tried it. And it worked a little too good, because I went pain-free for about 4 to 5 hours, which was the first time in months. Realized that, hey, I can move around. We went shopping and bought all kinds of new flooring to lay down on the living room floor, because now I've got all this energy, I can do this. Yeah, the next day when I woke up, I was the ball of pain and still had to lay a floor. I Wasn't satisfied that cannabis worked. I wanted to know why it worked. And our government tells us that there are no clinical studies on cannabis as a medicine. That is no lie, because I've read literally over 10,000 clinical studies that have been conducted around the world on cannabis. The majority of the research has been done in Israel. It doesn't matter which study you look at, they will all tell you the same thing. Patients will report that it's beneficial, and they'll report that more is better. The more you use, the better it works, depending on your condition. Not everybody is that severe. But at the same time, I wasn't legal. I was breaking the law. I had to be a criminal, basically save my life. So I was using cannabis while I was teaching my doctor how it was working. In September of 2010, I became legal. The day I became legal, I sat down with my doctor, and we worked a schedule to get me off the 27 pharmaceuticals I was taking a day. Forced myself off of those, and then started ingesting and smoking as much cannabis as I could put to me. Within 3 months, I was off all of the medications, including the withdrawals from the antidepressants that everybody has to prescribe you. If you're on to antidepressants and you want to quit them, do it over a year, don't do it 3 months, because the withdrawals are not fun, because there literally is withdrawals. You can lower yourself off gently if you have to. Use a lot of cannabis to do it. I got out of the wheelchair, I started walking again and moving around and continued to research, because even though it was helping me, I didn't think it was the answer that I needed to stay alive. The disease was still rapidly progressing. I was just more or less keeping at bay and keeping a lot of the symptoms subsided. That same summer, before I became legal, I ended up in the hospital with severe pain. They admitted me. I thought I had ruptured an appendix. They admitted me. They started running all kinds of tests, and they come back and said, no, we've got to do surgery. We've got to look. It's not your appendix, but it looks like you're filled with multiple lymphomas. I said, I don't believe you. I said, not with the amount of cannabis that I'm consuming on a daily basis. I don't think that's even possible. They said, well, we're pretty sure that it is. But it was only on the recommendation of what was coming back from the CAT scan and the x-rays. My blood work didn't show that I had any cancer. I got opened up, quickly closed back up, and brought to and said, it's not cancer, it's your multiple sclerosis, it's attacking your internal organs. There's nothing we can do. Would you like some narcotics? So I said no. I went back to my little curled up ball of pain, and right around the same time, they were coming out with information on the CCSVI procedure for people with MS. Basically, it's angioplasty to open up restricted veins. I had to go to the US. It cost us $12,000. I had to sneak there because I'm a legal medical marijuana patient, and that's actually, when you're one of those in Canada, you're an enemy of the state to the US, because you're allowed to use cannabis. You might tell them. They can find out on the internet. I tell everybody. I got the surgery done. I had my jugular veins blown open, the veins in my chest blown open, and I actually got a bit of relief from it. And it lasted for about 6 months to a year. And I started going back downhill again. The progression of the disease was taking over that. But at that time, I finished doing all of my research into how cannabis works with lipids and how lipids respond on the receptors. So the little known fact that the government people don't want you to know is every person in this room, whether you've used cannabis or not, have cannabinoids in your system, which are also the same as the ones found on the plants. The human body produces cannabinoids. It's a natural process. Pregnant women start producing even more, higher levels of cannabis, and most pregnant women will fail a drug test because they're producing so much more cannabinoids, and it's in the breast milk. And this has been known since the 60s, that the highest concentration of human cannabinoids is in human breast milk. And it's also why they say that it's so important for you to breastfeed at least the first feeding to a child. It boosts the immune system, promotes eating, makes them want to eat, plus calms them down. Well, that's exactly what cannabis does. It gives your immune system a boost, promotes the eating. So I started taking the liver research, the fact that cannabinoids are already in the human body. Let's see if we can make this work better. And what I started doing was mixing more of a synergistic approach, cannabis with hemp seed oil available from any grocery store. Hemp seed oil is high in omega-3, but it's legal. It's made from the same plant, but it's legal because there is little to no THC. That's how they can have it legalized. What they don't tell you is it has trace amounts of all of the other cannabinoids. So when we get to the cellular level of how cannabis works, every cell, if you can imagine this as a cell, has receptors. The cannabinoid receptors are called CB1 and CB2. CB1 receptors work very well with THC and omega-6 lipids. That's the receptor that really is responsible for people getting the euphoric feeling and the highness or off-kilter feeling that you get from using cannabis. CB2 receptors are responsible for the pain, right, the neurological things. CB2 receptors don't respond very well to omega-6 lipids, but they all open to omega-3. So it all kind of came together as the answer obviously has to be mixing cannabis with an omega-3 to take advantage of the CB2 receptors at the cellular level. You can do this by ingesting quantities of hemp seed oil and smoking your cannabis, and it'll attach to those lipids, but your diet is primarily omega-6. So the cannabinoids may attach to omega-6. The easier solution is to pre-attach them before you take them. So you take a concentrated dose of cannabis, mix it with hemp seed oil, and swallow that. Then you've already got a carrier to take it to your system. I also learned something else as soon as I started this new treatment, was I had to start over again and cut back because I was taking a very large amount and I was mixing it with olive oil. The day I switched, I figured, well, I'm used to this, I might as well take the same amount, and I mixed it with hemp seed oil. 3 days later, I didn't feel high anymore and realized, okay, that was way too much. So I had to cut back and start over. And you can do this. You can start with a small amount and slowly increase over time. People get stunned when they hear me say that I'm legally licensed to consume 30 grams of cannabis a day. 30 grams doesn't sound like much. It's just over an ounce, right? It's a bag about that much a day. But if you concentrate it down, you get 3 grams. And 3 grams is a lot easier to swallow in a day than try and swallow a bag full. The unfortunate side is, it's illegal. So right now, it's illegal. It's being fought in the Supreme Court. Once that is done there, then everybody will be allowed to freely use extracts, foods, things like that. I also learned very quickly that smoking a joint may provide some relief, but no more than 90 minutes. An ingested dose will provide relief for 4 to 5 hours. Right? So it's a big turnaround. So I got out of a wheelchair, got out of bed, started moving around, kept researching, mixed to this new formula, and lo and behold, I started getting a lot better. Where the progression stopped. And I was able to still move, do my gardening, work, things like that. I still have relapses, but seriously, they're no more severe than having the flu. I just feel horrible, achy. That's a relapse for me now. Maybe a little irritable. I can get a little cranky. But I mean, if you don't feel good, of course you're going to get cranky. Since 2012, the only medication that I use is hemp seed oil mixed with cannabis and liquid vitamin D. And I take that 3 or 4 times a day, every 4 to 5 hours. And I smoke cannabis on a regular basis. I testify in court on a regular basis. I do a number of these speaking events. And it still stuns me how people say, if you use 30 grams of cannabis in a day, you'd be a zombie and useless and do nothing. No. Because I've done it over such a long period of time, I've built up a resistance. I use what my body needs. The endocannabinoid system, which isn't everybody, produces the cannabinoids. I should go back one. My doctor, who was a hard person to convince. It was basically, I wasn't dying and I wasn't going away, so he was going to have to sign these forms for me eventually to become legal. When I go into his office now, I mean, I used to be in his office once a week for the first year and a half, at least once a week, for blood tests, MRIs, trying to get diagnosed. Then after that, just to be monitored on all the medications I was taking. When I go in now, it's once a year, and it basically calls me a miracle. I go in once a year for a blood test. He tests everything. All I want to know is my vitamin D level. Because people with multiple sclerosis have an inherently low level of vitamin D. Your safe level is between 75 to 150. My average was 28. By mix, and I was taking, 5,000 to 7,000 IU a day of vitamin D tablets. But talking to doctors and pharmacists, they all said the same thing, that vitamin D would probably work better with an omega-3. So I started taking vitamin D with the hemp seed oil. And after the first year, I went from a 28 to a 74.5. And all my doctor can say is, you figured this out on your own. I said, no, I figured this out on the science that they don't want you to see, because the science exists. The last time I went to see my doctor, as soon as he looked up, he looked at me and he said, I'm getting really tired of hearing all these people come in and say that cannabis cures cancer. And I looked right at him and I said, I don't think it cures cancer at all. And he didn't know what to say. He said, what do you mean? I said, I've never thought that cannabis cured cancer. I've never thought that cannabis cured anything. My belief is cannabis gives your body the fuel it needs for the immune system to do its job. The endocannabinoid system is there for a reason. You produce cannabinoids for a reason. If you're not producing enough, then something's going to be wrong. Damage that I had initially from onset is gone. It's been completely repaired. And all I do is keep getting better. People that start using cannabis on a regular basis, on a daily basis, will tell you that the health benefits are astounding. Women love this. Show your fingernails. There's a perfect example. Your fingernails grow. They're healthy, they look nice, your hair is nice. It actually makes you healthier. Now, is it just the omega-3 oil? or is it a combination? And I'd have to say it's a combination because I don't think I ingest more than a teaspoon of MCT oil a day. Would be less than a teaspoon, because all it is half of whatever's in the capsule, right? So it's very little, but it's a lot of cannabinoids for your system. Now we're researching, because you'll still get that euphoric feeling, you'll still get that high feeling when you're doing this. And I deal, because I got myself better, I might as well tell everybody else. So I deal with a lot of patients with a lot of different concerns. And the biggest concern is older patients afraid or not wanting that high feeling. Well, now we found out that there's actually an answer for that. And surprisingly, it's a simple solution, and that's to make a cannabis suppository. Because a cannabis suppository will go through the colon lining, I guess, extremely easy. The suppositories are a perfect delivery mechanism for medicine, but the advantage that it has is it bypasses the liver. So it doesn't get metabolized in the blood the same way. You still get all the medicinal benefit, you just don't get the high. So the people that don't want that can use a cannabis suppository, heal whatever wrong with them, or improve their health, but never feel stoned, right, or off kilter. And it's that simple. I usually tell people the same thing. I use cannabis as an ingested dose for the physical aspects, all right, such as the pain, the spasticity, the tremors that I no longer have to suffer with. That's why I ingest it. The reason I smoke cannabis is for the mental side, because a disease like that comes with depression, mood swings, the whole gamut of anxiety, I mean, everything like that. And what I found for myself is smoking it works better for the mental side. Plus, makes me a little more alert. I paying attention more than sitting there having all of these strange thoughts running through my head about how miserable I am. I just refuse to try and be miserable all the time. Once a week, maybe twice. But when it boils down to it, my doctor and I sat down, and within a few minutes we had calculated that because I use cannabis and no other pharmaceuticals, I'm saving the Nova Scotia taxpayers over $150,000 a year because of hospital visits, diagnostics, testings, as well as prescriptions, which would all be covered. Nobody covers my cannabis. That's my responsibility, because the government won't cover it because they don't recognize it as a medicine yet. And it's only because of the impact that it has. Almost any person that I've talked to that has started using, actually, I'll go one step further. I have a number of different roles. So I speak for Maritimers United for Medical Marijuana, who put the booth here. I'm also the communications director for the Medicinal Cannabis Patients Alliance of Canada, which is a federally registered not-for-profit organization. And I also co-host a radio show every Friday night on lifestyleradio.net. The MCPAC has been tasked to provide some politicians some numbers. So we set up our own survey, and if anybody wants, you can just go to MCPAC Canada, and it says fill out the survey. It takes you about 3 minutes to fill it out, just check the boxes. One of the questions that I put on there was, since you started using cannabis as a medicine, has your quality of life improved, gotten better, you're only alive because of it, or no change? There's not one respondent yet who has answered no change or gotten worse. every person that had responded to this, and I think we're probably at 300 or 400 people responding the last time I looked, not one has said that it hasn't helped. A majority has said that they're only alive because of it. I'm one. I put on that. I had to. Because the pharmaceuticals that I was on were going to kill me. The condition I had no approved medications to begin with. So, I mean, it was stupid for me to be taking these medications to begin with. But that's what the doctors gave me. Right now, the social and political atmosphere is this big push on to legalize it, and everybody's afraid that the children are going to have more access to it. Guess what? It doesn't matter. They can keep it illegal or make it legal. Children are going to have the same amount of access. They always will. But what parents need to know is, who cares? Seriously. There's never been a diagnosed case of psychosis or any illness ever related to cannabis. There's never been a contraindication with any medication or pharmaceutical with cannabis. And the reason being is, cannabis is part of your body, right? The cannabinoids are already there. You're not really going to rebel against them. I have met a few people that are allergic to cannabis. I've met thousands that say they're allergic to cannabis. And the easy thing is if you're allergic to cannabis, you're also allergic to tomatoes. And it's only the leaves. So if you touch a tomato leaf and you break out in those nice blisters or hives, the same thing may happen to you with cannabis. And it's a terpene or a flavonoid that's on both of the plants that people are allergic to. But people ingest cannabis, smoke cannabis, that are also allergic to it, and they have no ill effects. It's only touching the leaf. And it's probably less than 0.1% of the population would have that issue. The biggest problem we have with people is the stigmatism that's associated. Because everybody says it's bad, it's treated as being bad, when in fact it was all done as a ploy to make it illegal to protect industrial profits. That's the greatest fear that they have. So what we do is we educate people that cannabis is not toxic, it's not dangerous, it should not be on the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act, and you should be looking for an elected official that will take that stance. Taxing and regulating is not the answer, because they're still going to have access to it, and it still keeps it away from the industrial, and the industrial side really needs it. Right. How are we doing for time? I don't wear a watch.
25 to 3.
Pardon me?
25 to 3.
Yeah.
So we got like 10 minutes. Who's got questions? You do. I knew you
I
did.
do. Because there's such a government push on areas of cigarettes and the damage it does to your lungs, your throat, and everything. And if young people get into cannabis, they're not going to take it, you know, and measure it out and take it orally. They're going to smoke it. Do they going to get the same damage? I mean, if you
Not at all.
smoke,
There's never been a documented case of any person ever getting lung cancer from using cannabis. In fact, what a lot of patients do, that especially with asthma and COPD, they vaporize their cannabis and it cleans out their airways so they can breathe.
young people won't, probably some will do that if they go to one of these shops, but most will just have a...
There's a student right now in Saskatchewan who is basically going to the Human Rights Tribunal or going to court to be able to use his cannabis in school, because he can't be expected to sit in an 8-hour day in classroom and not be medicated when he needs it. So he's actually taking them to task to get permission to use it. We have children all over the world that use cannabis every day. Their parents have done the research, they've looked at it, and they realize that this is the best option. There's a big push on in the US right now for this high CBD oil or CBD only oil. I don't think it's the answer, but it's a great way to at least get it a little more accepted. And they're using this for children, especially epileptic children, because it will control their seizures. When it comes to kids using cannabis, I'm not worried at all, and neither should the parents. And the reason being is I live in Amherst, small little town. Do you know the average age for alcohol-induced coma is in our town? 13. All right? You don't get people in any coma from smoking a joint, or 2, or 3, or 50. It just doesn't happen. The most they might get is a really dry mouth and fall asleep after they eat a bag of chips. We make fun of the overdose factor of cannabis. There's no way you can overdose on cannabis. It's physically impossible to do that. People have a hard time understanding it. So what we've done now is we now say, okay, the overdose point is when you can feel your heart rate increase 10 beats a minute. That's when you've had too much. And in ingested dose, you'll feel it more than you would for smoking it because you need a lot to get it there. But your heart rate will increase about 10 to 15 beats per minute. No more than that. But it's enough to send people into a panic attack. They think they're having a heart attack. Oh my God, I feel my heart. I'm going to die. Really all they need to do is put on some cartoons or some music, eat a bag of chips, relax, it'll go away in a little while. When I start to feel it, I smoke a joint. I add more. And it calms me down enough that it goes away. I mean, anxiety is one of those really scary feelings that nobody ever wants to have or go through, and the first time you go through it, it's scary. If it's induced by cannabis, then you're afraid that it's going to happen all the time. Well, it only happened because you took too much. If you weren't being a pig, really, then you wouldn't be in that situation. So what we do is we teach people to start at very small doses. Now, as for the 10 to 15 beats per minute, it's perfectly fine because it also lowers your blood pressure. And the reason it lowers your blood pressure is because it relaxes all of the veins, or all of the muscles surrounding the veins to allow better blood flow. So it actually is, it's flushing out your system is what it's doing. So to keep up with the drop in blood pressure, it increases your heart rate just to pump the blood a little further. That's why your eyes get red. You smoke a joint, your eyes get red? Well, it's because you've expanded all of the veins and arteries in your body, and now you can see them. That's probably the healthiest thing you could do for your eyes, is get some new fresh blood in them and clean it out. Any other questions?
So if you have, like I have low blood pressure, like 60/40 on a regular basis, what would be, ideal to do?
Use cannabis. Seriously, because it doesn't lower your blood pressure that much. It only lowers your blood pressure to make up for the heart rate increase. All right? Or the blood pressure really is only being lowered because there's more room for the blood to go. Right? It's a little more expansion and it's flowing a little better. There's our masked bandit coming in now. Must be almost time for us to go. But there's another patient that can attest, all right, that he can owe his life to cannabis, as well as a few others in this room.
So everybody, like now you see on the media, government put out, the smoking causes lung cancer, blah, blah, blah. Then you get now, they're saying, new documents showing that smoking marijuana is worse than
Of course they do.
smoking
Because
cigarettes,
they need
which
this,
we know isn't.
They need this public stigmatism against cannabis to be maintained, or they'll have no choice but to take it off the drug schedule.
Yeah.
And that's their greatest fear. Cannabis coming off the drug schedule will severely damage the pharmaceutical industry, the oil industries, the plastic industries, the textile industries, the forestry industries, right? all of those industries are going to be impacted. So those industries are putting as much money as they can into these studies to say that this is bad, so that people like you believe that these are bad. Health Canada, who are supposed to be taking care of us, Rona Ambrose will get up and say there are no clinical studies to show that cannabis works. And that is no right lie. And you can Google it. Because in 2010, Dr. Mark Ware from McGill University finished a 10-year study of smoked cannabis and neuropathic pain. The study doesn't show what our government says. Because the study shows that every patient in that clinical trial benefited from using cannabis, and not only did they benefit, they proved that more was better. That the more they used, the less pain they had, and the better they felt. These are what your government don't want you to know. So it's easier for them to say, well, there's no clinical studies. Their name is on it, because it was done in Canada. Right? So this is why we need to change public perception. And this is why I'm at a health and wellness event and not at a cannabis event. Because it's now, the general public has to learn that they've been lied to. And that there's better alternatives out there. I mean, I walked around and I looked at all of the great stuff that's out there, and I mean, as great as some of that stuff is, I would say 90% of it can be replaced by using a cannabis therapy. And if you grow your own, then you get to go outside and get fresh air and all that gardening. And that's probably what keeps me going more than anything. I mean, I'm just itching for the snow to get out of my yard, because I want to get my garden growing for this year's crop. Because I'll grow my own medicine, and because I'm growing it myself, it'll be the best medicine in the world.
Are you allowed to do?
Am I allowed to do that?
No, but yeah. Are you?
I'm legally.
You are. I
I'm
thought
legally
you could
licensed
do your own.
to grow and
Really?
possess. Yes.
I thought or was that before maybe? I was told that you couldn't grow your own.
In 2000, Terry Parker went to court, fought his battle in court, and the courts went to the federal government and said, you must have a program to allow medical marijuana to patients. So they come up with the that's probably our time. Marijuana for medical purposes, MMAR, right? Their access regulations. Through fighting, it was designed to fail, but the patients made it work by fighting in court and getting it to work and working around these stupid rules and regulations they had. Because it didn't fail, they decided to trash it. That program allowed us to grow our own or have somebody designated to grow for us. There was no subsidies or anything like that. You absorb your own cost for your own medicine. So that's what we all had to do. Because the program didn't fail, and they had just lost another court battle and were told to go back and fix it, they came back with a whole new program where they would license commercial producers to sell it to patients. The unfortunate side is they told all of the licensed producers that the patients will have no choice. It'll be their only way to access it. You will have that entire customer base. Corporations have sunk millions into setting up these big commercial grow establishments. They've had nothing but headaches ever since with trying to get licensed through Health Canada and with the growing quality. I mean, every week we're seeing product being recalled by these growers because of things like mold, right, in their medicine. I'd like to say I feel bad for these people that have sunk in millions of dollars into these things, but they should have realized that the patients weren't going to agree to these terms that were thrown onto them. So the patients have revolted, and that is in the courts now, and it's being fought. So last year, April 1st, was when the new regulations were supposed to come in force. we as patients had a court case that basically gave us an injunction that everybody that was covered under the old program up to a certain date could grow, and up to another arbitrary date to possess. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people fell into this gray area because Health Canada refused to renew a bunch of licenses. So they kind of got thrown out, but the rest of us that were up to date in our licenses are allowed to possess and grow our own until this is fought out in the courts. And according to the MCPA's lawyer, this could be 5 to 10 years before it's all said and done. Because whatever decision comes out from this court case, it's going to be appealed by either party to take it to a higher court, which is fine. Because if they're doing it for 5 to 10 years, I'm growing my own medicine for another 5 to 10 years. And I'm not paying $10 a gram buying something that's treated with radiation and probably covered in mold. My cost is less than 10 cents a gram. Right? And that's what the biggest kicker is. People on disability pensions and people that are sick cannot afford these outrageous prices. So we're trying to convince the courts, let us grow, keep our rates to grow. We'll cover our own costs of medicine. Don't legalize it. Take it off the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act. People want to use it, let them use it. Take it out of the black market. Because if it's not on the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act, it's no longer a commodity to the black market. Anybody can grow their own. Why would they grow it and sell it for 10,000 times what it's worth? And in all seriousness, the average price for a ton of cannabis should be around the same as a ton of corn, about $100 a ton. Because if you're growing it, you can grow it for that much, right, if you don't have restrictions. Of course, they should have some restrictions. If they take it off the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act, great. Anybody can grow their own, doesn't matter how many plants, as long as you're using it for yourself. But the same as if you were growing tomatoes in your backyard and decided to start selling them to the grocery stores, then you'd need a commercial license. Cannabis should be no different, right? But at the same time, if you're not legal and you need it, don't think twice. Just go ahead and do it. Because it's your life. And you have organizations like MUMM and their court support initiative that if you get busted, we'll go to court with you. And we'll fight for you. Because it's really your right as a person to have this as a medicine if it works for you. Right? Any other questions? None?
Yes, if you're caught, say,
Yep.
growing on your property, hypothetically,
Yep.
would you not lose your home? Could you not lose your home?
No. No, because then what they have to do is the asset forfeiture, they've got to prove that your home is a result of you growing illegally. Right?
Okay.
So Bob has just been arrested for growing illegally. Bob will be fighting this in court with a charter challenge. Right, Bob?
Oh, yeah.
Right. And the reason being is the charter says you can do it, and all of the court cases preceding this back to 2000 say we can do it. The only ones that say we can't is our conservative government. Right? So when you go to vote, think about what you're actually voting for. Because legalization is not the right option. Right? Go find a politician that's going to stand up for allowing you safe access to a medicine so that you can reduce the taxpayers' cost of $150,000 a year too. All right? And if there's no more questions, we'll go on over time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.